It actually looks like an owl.
Mary Lee, did you bring something in there? Yeah, that's awesome. Why? Oh, I bet you're crocheting.
You try to help. Nothing you can do, David. Nothing
Just
you
like
can
when
do.
I thought you had a crochet. Oh, you're crocheting.
I've got some one, I don't crochet.
You did?
Melinda tried to teach me one.
What about the lady?
This,
That-
Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3.
We're almost done stretching the scrolls for those who've joined in. We're doing, instead of one big scroll from the front to the back, we're doing 5 scrolls, each to a different book of the Torah, and we're almost done. For anyone who just joined on, we're almost done stretching out the 5 Torahs, one for each book. The 5 Torahs, one for each book of the Torah. And we will get started very soon chatting about things.
Hello, hello, Chag Sameach, everyone. It is a beautiful, beautiful Simchat Torah. Leave it to the Jews who don't live in Israel to make a 7-day holiday into an 8-day holiday and then into a 9-day holiday. Simchat Torah in Israel is already over. They do Shmini Atzeret and Simchat Torah on the same day, so they are done already. But we are here this evening. We have members of the Yiddish choir. We have Herman. Are you a member of the Yiddish choir? All right. We have Miranda, our joyful almond, and we have our macadamias. We have Scott and Tab, and we have, well, he's not macadamia. He's, what is he? What kind of nut will he be? He will be a cashew. He's our cashew. He's or a pistachio. Which one? You like to be green or you like to be tasty? Cashew. He's our tasty cashew. We are here. We're going to have some music from the Yiddish choir. We are going to take a look. As you can see here, we have 5 Sifrei Torah out. Each one has one book of the Torah. So from left to right is Bereshit, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Now we're going to take a tour through there. I'm going to show you some of the interesting pieces, maybe one book at a time in between songs or something like that. And then the people who are here get to pick a word if they want, and we'll give them the meaning, and hopefully that word will have some impact on them this year. So,
Chris, do you want to hold the camera so we can see?
He's got it. We can do that. He's got it. All right, so if we have our Yiddish choir members come forward, or backward, or any direction.
Where do you need me? You need me to just point at him?
Pointing at him now, and then when we start doing the Torah, you did that last year. So
well. Yeah.
You guys want to move closer for the Yiddish choir part?
Sorry, we got big voices.
Yeah, we can proceed them first. Go to the second page.
Yes, it's you, the woman I can see. Shake me golden stinking Bentina. You bet la vida transformerà. Fixa per la vida transformerà. Fixa per no destroyer, y quiere voce no destroyer, but I think the stink is given to me. is given in me. Oh, he's my cuisine. Even I to my next one. Most important living next one. A joking over my cuisine. As the birds of the golden Medina, a joking over my cuisine. As the birds of the golden He's ready for Bereshit.
All right, we're gonna have our panel guy come on over here, and we're gonna visit the book of Genesis, the book of Bereshit, the first book in our Torah. Simchat Torah does not celebrate the giving of the Torah. That is on Shavuot. But what we do is we are in a yearly cycle of Torah readings. So when you have a minyan on Shabbat morning, on Monday mornings, on Thursday mornings, you read from a selected parsha or a sedra. And there are 54 parshiot in the Torah, which corresponds usually to the 54 weeks in a Hebrew calendar year. But, you know, sometimes when we have a shorter year, which doesn't have all of those weeks, we double them up. There's 7 times where we double them up throughout the year. But each parsha has its own week, or each week has its own parsha. And this Shabbat, we're going to start off with Parashat Bereshit, the first parsha of the Torah. And as you can see, it starts with a big letter Bet. Right? It's one of the biggest that you'll see in the Torah. And our commentator Rashi, many commentators ask, why does it start with the letter Bet? Why doesn't it start with the letter Aleph? The letter Aleph, of course, is the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and Bet is the second. Well, they say because Bet is closed on top, on one side and on the bottom, you can only move forward. And so you're not supposed to worry about things that are above us, below us, or before us, meaning don't think about what happens when we're in the grave. Don't think of what happens in Olam Haba. Don't very much spend a lot of time looking at the past. Just notice and go forward. So Bereshit covers the creation of the world. This is the first creation story. Here's the second creation story, which brings us into the story of Adam and Eve. And that takes us through a number of columns. Each column is a specific width and length. The letters are spaced accordingly. Some of the letters are big. Some of the letters are a little bit smaller than others, simply because the letters have to go to the end of the line. These breaks are that's where they're supposed to be. When a person writes a Sefer Torah, they can't make it up as they go along. They follow a pattern. This is what we would call a Vav Torah. And the Vav Torah is that the first letter of every column, or almost every column, is going to begin with the letter Vav. And so, I mean, you'll find some that don't, nothing in Genesis here is like that. So we get through the creation story, we get to the story of Noah and the animals, and then we enter into, this is still Noah. It's still Noah. Noah takes up a long part. And so we get to right here. This is the beginning of the story of Abraham. Vayomer Adonai el Avram lek lecha me'artzecha. Right? God says to Abraham, go you from your land. And now the rest of the book of Genesis, all the way to the end, is going to deal with Abraham and his descendants. So we have the story of Abraham. Then we're going to have the story of Isaac. He gets a little bit. And we're going to have the story of Jacob and his sons, or the story of Jacob with his machinations with Lavan, his stuff with his 2 wives, his all sorts of things with him. And we keep going, and then we hit the story of Joseph. The story of Joseph, this is Dinah. This is the story of Jacob's daughter Dinah. And then from this point on, for the rest of the book of Genesis, the largest complete story is the story of Joseph. And that runs the rest of the Torah. What's so important about the story of Joseph is that it gets us into the next book. And the next book is going to be our time in Egypt and beyond. So we start with the creation of the world, and we end with Bnei Israel going down into Egypt. Now, if I can find very quickly, it's right here. The Torah is filled with all sorts of very, very interesting tidbits of information, not only story-wise, but in how it is written. And every year I look for this, and every year I have a tough time finding the dots written above the words. Because there are the specific dots that are written above certain words at certain times, and those dots have to be there, but we don't know why. That's the funny thing. We know that, oh, here they are. It's right at the top. All right, so you can see that Vav has a little dot. All these little dots are there, and there are an equal number of dots for the letters. And so the rabbis say, well, take it at face value when there are more dots, when there are the same number of dots. But those dots have to be there, we don't know. And this is an interesting word because it is when when Jacob and Esau meet again, and Esau hugs him and kisses him, but the rabbis say, no, he actually bites him. And so that's what that's supposed to teach us. We have interesting characters in our Torah, we really do. I don't know if the characters are as interesting as the commentators, but that's the first book of the Torah. Anybody want to take a look and see if they want to get a word from the first book of the Torah? Here comes Tam. She knows what she wants. She's going to pick a word she knows and see if I know it. That's what she's going to do. That word? Which word here?
Is that B'Shavat?
No, that's B'Sheva.
B'Sheva.
Right? That's the number 7.
Oh,
All right? Do you like the number 7, or do you want to try a different word?
I think the number 7 is cool.
Number 7. Number 7 in Judaism is a particularly fine number. It is the number of creation, 7 days of creation. It is a prime number in mathematics, and it signifies God's creative powers. So the number 7 for Tam this year, hope it brings blessing and good insight for her. Much success. All right, is the Yiddish choir ready? Yes. All right, we'll send you back to the choir. We'll see you for the book of Exodus.
So some of the songs that we've been doing are ones that the Yiddish choir has done here for many, many decades. Some of them are relatively recent additions to the list. This is one of those, and this is a song that comes from the former Soviet Union. And so it is Yiddish. It's got a little bit of Russian sprinkled throughout just for fun. This is the Little Boots. Vergriffen die Sabuschke und voran läuft die Droschke. Ach, wie mit dir nehmen zu sein. O ihr von dir und du mir, ihr Danke und ihr geht zu der Finger. Und verkaufen fremde Scham.
So this is a folk song. It's a love song about all the things they do without to be together. And the coolest line is, "You without me is like a doorknob without a door." And I think that takes us back to without the Torah, we're like a doorknob without a door. So there you go.
Oh, I like that. I like that.
It's a useful, useless thing.
Yes. And so the book of Genesis leaves us in Egypt with Joseph and his brothers. And so the book of Exodus picks up with that story. The book of Exodus in Hebrew is actually Shemot, which is the second word of the Parsha. In the Parshiot are named for the first major word of that week's Parsha. It actually begins, Ve'ela Shemot B'nai Yisrael Haba'im Mitzrayma Et Yaakov Ish Uveito, right? And the word Va'ela is, I'm not going to say it's a throwaway word, but it's a fairly common word. And so we don't want to start a Parsha with a common word. We want to separate it so that we can find it easily. So the word is Shemot. Now I'm using my little yod, which is a silver pointer. The Torah scroll is written on parchment, a kosher animal skin, which has been treated. It's printed it's written by hand and with handmade ink, homemade ink, and a quill. And so we don't touch the Torah, one, out of respect, but two, our hands are awfully oily. And if we start touching the letters, we're going to smear the letters. What I've noticed about this Sefer Torah is that it is not a Vav Torah. It has the Vav at this column, but there's a Hey above Vav, but there's an Aleph, and there's a Chaf, and there's a Hey. So this is not a Vav Torah, but that's okay. It's just a different style of Torah. The book of Exodus is really the beginning of the story of Moses. And it starts off with the story of Moses, him meeting God at the burning bush, going to Pharaoh, the plagues, all of that. Now, there's some very interesting styles of writing here in the book of Exodus. The first one is the song at the sea. This is the song that Bnei Yisrael sang when they crossed the sea after the Red Sea parted, the Sea of Reeds. And it is written that it looks like bricks, which is to remind us of the suffering in Egypt, that our ancestors had to make bricks. Now you'll see some of these little curly cues at the bottom of letters. There's one that's very clear. They have to be there. All the things at the top as well. But this particular poem is considered by some, and this little piece after it, to be the oldest part of the Torah. That was one of the first things that people had when they were setting up civilization. They had song and poetry before they had prose. And so this is a piece of poetry that some scholars say is probably one of the original pieces of our Torah. And it is not even halfway through the story yet, right? So we've had the story here in Egypt. We have the crossing of the Sea of Reeds. Now we have them coming to and getting the Aseret HaDibrot, the 10 Commandments, which starts right down here with Vayadaber Elohim et kol hadvarim ha'ela lemor. And God said all of these things, saying, Anochi Adonai Elohecha asher hotzeiticha me'eretz Mitzrayim mibeit avadim. That is the first statement. It's not a commandment. It's God reintroducing God's self to the children of Israel, saying, I'm the one that brought you to the party. Don't have any other gods before me. Your relationship is with me. And so that starts, and then we come up to the Zachor et Yom HaShabbat, right? To remember Shabbat, Kibud Kaved et Avicha ve'et Imecha, right? Honor your parents. Here are the lows, right? Don't murder, don't commit adultery, don't be a ganef, lo tignov, don't steal, don't covet. And so that's a very important piece. We're going to see this repeated in another part of the Torah, but it's going to be written slightly differently. It's going to be written with a different style. So there's and now we continue with the story, all the different parshiot that deal with what happens in the desert. I'm trying to think of, there's a little interesting piece here, and I don't know, it just might be this particular style of Torah. There's a very small column. As you can see, it's about half the size of the other columns. I mean, that might be something that the Sofer did to make it his own, to show that it was he as the writer, the Sofer. And so we continue all the way through, and then we come down to the next book, the start of the next book, which is Vayikra, and we'll pick up over there. And the books are separated by a large space. And the book of Vayikra is a bit of a renegade, and you'll have to wait to see what that means after our next psalm. Anybody for the book of Shemot who wants to let a word from Shemot? Pardon? You want the word Devarim?
Yeah.
Here's Devarim.
Yeah.
The words.
Yeah.
That's your word for the year. Devarim, the words. Now the word Devar also means thing. Thing as in an object. So
There's so many things.
yeah, it's one of the books of the Torah, Devarim, which is words. These are the words. So Devarim, may it bring you blessings and good things. May you speak Devarim Tovim. May you speak good words.
Good words. I hope so. Thank you.
All right.
You want a word? Any word. Ashira. Ashira. Do you know what that means?
Is it, we will sing?
I will sing.
I will sing.
I will sing Ashira from the song of By the Sea, because it starts Az Yashir, and so Moses sang with the children of Israel this song to God, saying, Vayomru Lemor, they said these words, being Ashira Ladonai Kiga Agao, right? I will sing to God because God is great. So good. Ashira, may you continue to sing. May you continue to sing. You and your guitar. And now for the next song. I sound like I'm a radio announcer. Next song.
All right, as promised, some of the older songs, some of the newer songs, and this one has become a favorite. It's translated to the Yiddish from the English and originally by Leonard Cohen, and this is Hallelujah.
Nur dir bloß nicht geringer sei Yeshua. Mir singt das Ohr davon, am Nischen Welle fehlt ein Punkt, der Dule meldet, Halleluja. Dein Himmels Geburtsstand, Mascheva Gott sie kaufen kann, wir fliegen und die Bewohner deine Ruhe. Sie nimmt dein Griff, sie nimmt dein Kopf, sie schneit von deiner Wurzel und singt von neuer Europa, Halleluja. O Teile, ich bin ein Still, ich bin geschlafen auf dein Gift, wo ging und nicht gelöst mit Außerzuhe. Ihr seht den Schloss, ihr seht ein Fond, aber es ist nicht kein Lebenstraum, es ist eine Karte ohne Kleinen, Halleluja. Am Abend des tust du mit Schild und weißes Gelicht, dies Leben nicht der Wand nicht in Ruhe. Nos blessed hates in jedem Nuss, und alle Fleiß forbidden so, die ewige und kein Halleluja. 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 Und das ist das, ist nicht kein Sack, ich mach der Weile, was ich mach, ich wundere, wie ein Mensch ist, Menschenruhe. Und schaust verloren, Zeit ist ab, der Weg verloren, nein, und schreien, wie wir fallen, Halleluja. Halleluja.
Well, I could listen to that one all night, so let's do it again. That is a beautiful, beautiful version of Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah, which isn't so bad in its original. I'll tell you that. All right, we are at the third book of the Torah. It's a bit of a renegade. It is called Vayikra, and it means that God called out, or Moshe called out, I'm sorry. And this aleph is, you can see next to the other aleph, it's a little bit smaller, and that is supposed to be there. Now, depending on whom you ask, if you ask me, that's because it was a scribal error, and somebody thought it was Vayikar because the next word is El, and so they thought they might be able to double it with one aleph, but nope. So somebody went in and they kind of put that little aleph there to let us know. There are all sorts of midrashim, rabbinic stories about that, but the book of Vayikra has nothing to do with the narrative of what happened in the first two books and what's going to happen in the last two books. This is basically an entire book of laws, mostly for the Kohanim, for the priests, and how they are supposed to behave. There are a number of interesting pieces that come in here. Some of the laws of kashrut are explicated here, which makes it not just then for the Kohanim, for the priests, but for all of us. The famous lines that people use to pick on gays and lesbians comes out of this book. And I'll tell you that verse does not mean 100%. I fully know 100% that verse does not mean what it's been translated as for the last 2,000 years. And if you're interested in that why, I will let you know, but that's for another time. But that verse does not mean that. But the rules about not eating shellfish and everything, they still stand. But that one verse has been mistranslated and misinterpreted for 2,000 years. There are no real interesting orthographical, or any kinds of things like that in the book of Vayikra. It's an interesting book because it deals with the idea of what we call holiness. And how do you become holy? How does a person, how does a nation be holy? And this is some of the ways that you do it, by watching what you eat, by watching what you wear, by watching with whom you marry, and things like that. Unfortunately, most people think it's the most boring book of the Torah. It can be, and that's why it's put in the middle. Because if it was the first book or the last book, we would skip over it. But it's right in the middle and you can't skip over it. But there's a lot of good things to find in here. Nothing of real interest in terms of big letters, small letters. And I'm just double checking. No, but it would be really nice if somebody wanted a letter from the book of Vayikra. That would be nice. No takers. Oh, here comes Maury. He's going to find a word. Watch it be a good word. I hope it's a good word. Anywhere, any of the partial. This one?
Yeah.
Betochem, within them, or yeah. Yep, within, meaning like together. May the spark of the Torah burn within you for the entire year, and may you learn about unity and togetherness.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and the book of Vayikra ends just with Tziva Adonai et Moshe el Bnei Yisrael Bahar Sinai, that God commanded Moshe all these things on Mount Sinai. And so then we will pick up the next book, which is not a renegade, but it is a long one and has lots of good things in it.
So you just had the Renegade book, and so now we're going to sing the Renegade song. Which is to say that the rest of the songs have been Yiddish, but as it turns out, there are other Jewish languages in the world, one of which is very closely related to Spanish, and it's called Ladino. And so what you'll hear in this music is a very strong continental Spanish influence, specifically kind of an Andalusian sound. It's almost like a flamenco song. The language will be familiar if you know any Spanish, but it's just different enough to be Ladino instead.
Ladino and Latin, not Latin, Ladino and Yiddish. We need some song. We have some in Hebrew yet? Not yet. Not yet. All right, we pick up the book of Devarim. I'm sorry, not Devarim, Bamidbar. So it's Vayedaber Adonai El Moshe Bamidbar. So it's the fifth word in before we get a word that's going to signify for us the beginning of the Parsha. The book of Bamidbar picks up where the book of Exodus left off. All right, so this is now completing the narrative. In this part, we have a listing of all the chieftains and all the princes of the tribes and who their fathers were. And then we continue with the narrative. This has a lot of interesting pieces. A number of things come to us from this book that show up in our liturgy, if not every day, at least every week on Shabbat. We have, let's see, I want to find a couple of things, but right here, we have the priestly blessing, the priestly benediction, right, which is one of the most common things that people will use for when they want to bestow words of blessing on someone. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, Yeh panav eilecha v'chuneka, Yisa Adonai panav eilecha v'yasem lecha shalom. Right, this is, God says, Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe lemor diber el Aharon ve'el banav lemor ko tivarchu et bnei Yisrael. God says to Moshe, speak these words to Aharon and his sons. This is how they will bless the children of Israel. But they're not bestowing a blessing on them. They're not saying, I bless you. What they're saying is, may God bless you. May God do all of these things. We Jews, rabbis, the Kohanes, the Levis, we have no special powers. God is the one who blesses. We just use the Torah and the words of the Torah for blessing. What's interesting about the Torah is I think this is why we have survived for so long. And it's not just because the words are important. It's because unlike other religions, we are not a religion that is tied to a place. Now, we had the temple, we're tied to Israel, but Jews have lived all over the world in many, many different communities, many different cultures. The Sefer Torah is often all we took with us. And so we are a very portable religion. We are not tied to one place. Although Israel is very, very important, we survived almost 2,000 years without a huge presence in Israel. What kept us going was our Torah. So we have the priestly blessing here. Then now what we have here is this little piece. We have two inverted nuns. There's a nun there, and there's a nun there. And these are letters, and they are upside down. Let me see. This is what a nun should look like. And as you can tell, these are inverted. Now, we don't know why that is there. And the piece that is here doesn't fit. It doesn't make sense in the narrative of what's going on. But we do know this every week when we have a Torah service. We sing Vayehi bin Soa Ha'aron Vayomer Moshe Kuma Adonai V'Yafutzu Oivecha and following. This is the part of the Torah reading, the introduction to the Torah service, but we don't know why it's here. Some say that the nuns say that this is a separate book of the Torah, that these few lines make up an extra book of the Torah, turning the 5 books of Moses, because this is the 4th, that what came before it would be 5th, what comes there is the 6th, and then what comes after it would be the 7th, and now we'd have an 8th book of the Torah. Right? Just because of those 2 little nuns. Let's see, what else do we have going on down here? I think after the nuns, that's it. It's just a lot of historical stuff, the troubles with different kings that would come after them, the stories of the spies, and all of that. And then we end. We end with them poised to cross into the promised land. Right, with them poised into getting ready to go into the promised land. And then the 5th book of the Torah, the last book of the Torah, it has a very, very interesting story that goes with it. Anybody want a word from Labid Bar?
Exactly.
Do you know exactly what you want?
Where's the priestly blessing? Oh, here it is.
You want Adonai? Well, somebody might say you are chutzpah. Somebody who has chutzpah for picking God's name out of the Torah. Well, may God be with you. May the letters of God's name influence you and keep you inspired and bring blessing and love into your life.
Thank you. Well, he's a big part of my life.
Well, that's good. That's good. No, that is good. You're the first one in all the years I've done this who's picked God's name. So very good, very good. All right, do we have another song? This is live from Huntington. The Yiddish choir.
This is Oscar already hailing it. It's one of the funnest songs that we do. It's very bouncy and fun. And, generally leads to laughter both in the performers and the audience. So.
As der ist gekommen, sehr früh, ist gekommen, sehr früh, wenn mehr. Und ist getun nicht viel, und getun nicht viel, und geschehen auf der Welt, das ist schön. Und das ist wieder, wie das wird, so Ist geboren noch mehr Freilich, ist geboren noch mehr Freilich, tut uns getrunken und uns getrunken und geschehen noch ein Sinn, das ist weg. Ist geboren noch Frieden, ist geboren noch Frieden, gute Sieg gemacht auf und noch Geschichte von dem Stammeshaft und geschrieben noch die Keime, das Geschehen.
All right, the last book of the Torah, the final book of the Torah, apparently wasn't originally part of the Torah. There is a story in, I don't know if it's Kings 1 or Kings 2, about King Josiah. King Josiah was one of the few really, really good and righteous kings in our history. And one day he decides that he wanted to kind of, spritz up the temple a little bit. And he said, well, people have been paying money and paying taxes, and where is it gone? The temple's falling apart. And the priests had been skimming the money. And so he's like, no, this isn't how it works. And so he instituted a house cleaning of the temple. And apparently in an aron, in a closet, they found a scroll. And the scroll turns out to be the book of Deuteronomy. The book of Deuteronomy in the Greek means the second law, because basically the book of Deuteronomy is a restatement of much of what came from the first 4 books of the Torah, with the exception, actually the last 3 books of the Torah. The book of Genesis doesn't figure prominently at all in here. And it's a lot of rehashing of material, but there are something like 70 new mitzvot that are found here that aren't in other parts of the Torah, and many of them dealing with how you have to behave once you settle the land. So there are many scholars who believe that this was written after the land had been settled and was appended to the Torah to give it legitimacy. And of course, it is a legitimate book of the Torah. We read it. We're finishing it up this evening. And it's called Devarim, or the Book of Words. Eile Devarim asher diber Moshe el kol Yisrael. Right? These are the words that Moshe spoke to all of Israel. The book is a series of speeches, 3 major speeches given to Moshe before he climbs Mount Nebo to die. And he is talking to the generation that did not come out of Egypt in the book of Exodus. He's talking to the generation that was born during the 40 years of wandering in the wilderness, because their parents and their grandparents didn't have faith that God would deliver them to the land. And so a lot of this is repetition. One of the most notable pieces that is repeated are the 10 Commandments. And they start right here. Anochi Adonai Elohecha asher hotzeiticha me'eretz Mitzrayim mibeit avadim. Sounds very, very familiar. It's almost a carbon copy of the first time, except for Shabbat. The word here is Shamor et Yom HaShabbat lekodsho, guard or protect the Sabbath day to make it holy. And way back in Exodus, it was Zachor, remember the Sabbath day. And now all sorts of commentaries and all sorts of scholars have wrestled with this. But basically in Exodus, this is the first time they're hearing anything about Shabbat. This is the first time that it's becoming a law for them. And so they had to remember every 7 days. The seventh day was Shabbat. There were no laws for Shabbat yet, other than on the seventh day, you rested. Remember, they were slaves for 400 years. They didn't have a day off. And now God is reminding them in the Torah, Zachor Yom HaShabbat, remember the seventh day, remember the Sabbath day. Here, the Shamor is to protect it. They already know about the seventh day. Now they have to come up with ways of making sure that it remains a day of rest, that it is not a day where you go to do work. It's not a day where you go and run errands because it's a day of the weekend. Seventh day, you rest. You have to guard it. You have to keep it dear to you. Following on the heels of the Ten Commandments, we have the 6 words that make up pretty much our only theology, the Shema. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Right? And you'll see that the ayin is written big and the dalid is written big, and it's very exaggerated, so you don't confuse it with a resh and say, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is something else or an other." And the word, the aleph and the eight and the dalid put together give us the Hebrew word aid, which means witness. And so when we hear or when we listen, when we hear the voice of God, when we heed the words of the Torah, we become witnesses to God's great power. And they are back to back. And then, of course, you have the Hafta that comes right after the Shema. In the prayer book, we have a line that is Baruch Shem Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. We don't, that is not part of the Torah. That is traditionally why we don't say it out loud, except on Yom Kippur. The other reason is that the rabbis say Moshe stole it from the angels, and if they hear us reciting it, they're going to get angry. Apparently, angels can get angry. So we have the Shema and the Hafta. We continue the story of Moshe all the way through. These are all separate speeches. Again, not a lot of interesting letters, not a lot of orthography that makes us pay attention until we get towards the end. Whereas the final parshiot, Ha'azinu, is written like a song. So the line starts here, and then the second part of the line is here. And it goes back and forth, almost like a call and response in the column. This is one of the most difficult parshiot to read, not because the Hebrew is difficult, not because the trope is difficult. It's difficult because you have to skip over, and sometimes you drop down a line or go up a line, right? So you're reading here, and then so this is very, very difficult to read. Here is the last parsha. This is the parsha that gets read not on Shabbat. It's the only parsha that's not read on Shabbat. It is read on Simchat Torah, and it's called V'zot HaBracha. And it's Moshe's last words to the children of Israel, saying that these are the blessings. This is, you will be blessed, and God's going to take care of you. Remember everything that I taught you. And then he goes up onto Mount Nebo to die, and the Torah ends. Gadol Asher Asa Moshe Le'enei Kol Yisrael. Right. So this is Moshe was one of the great prophets of Israel, and he was very important in the eyes of all Israel. Now, we remember that the Torah began with the letter Bet at the very, very beginning. It ends with the letter Lamed. The letter Lamed ends the Torah, and we immediately go back to the beginning. So if we take the Torah and we put it in a big circle, the letter that ends the Torah leads to the letter that begins of the Torah, and it gives us the word Lev, heart. And so the Torah is all about our heart. And that many, many times it says you will impress these words upon your heart. You will take these words to your heart. You will love God with all of your heart. The heart in the minds of the biblical authors was not the seat of emotion, it was the seat of the intellect. And so we take these words and we impress them upon our hearts. We think about them day and night. We meditate upon them. We talk about them so that we can make the Torah very, very important, not only to us, but to our children, our grandchildren, people who are passionate about Judaism. So the Torah ends with the letter Lamed. We roll it back up. We say, thank you, God, for giving us this opportunity to end the Torah. But then again, we begin it immediately again, anew, because there's always so much more to learn. So I thank you for joining me on this tour. I thank my cameraman, Chris, who is always our technical guy, our Yiddish choir. It's not a Yiddish song. Who requested it? Yeah. No, it's fine. I love it. But you need to see the Star Spangled Banner too. It's actually it's sports stadiums. They get in trouble if they're somewhere and they don't sing the American. They don't have the American anthem, but they play the anthem of another country.
Oh, interesting. What is that for English songs?
Sophia, O Lord God, Sikatenu, Atikva Bachmotapayim, Niatan Kovshi, Be'atenu, Eretz Zion, Yerushalayim. V'yotam Kovshi, Be'atenu, Eretz Zion, Yerushalayim.
Anybody else want a word?
Herman, you haven't got a word.
He knows them all.
I got a word for you.
He was.
Is it true that a sofa has to do this all by memory?
No,
I heard one said they did.
you heard wrong. They have.
I would think that they would.
They have what's no. There's no way you can do this by memory. They have a tikkun in front of them, and they follow along, and they go back and check.
You know, the son has to learn from the father, and it goes out.
Oh yeah, I mean there are
Generation
people who could read the Torah from memory, but to actually write it and to remember the spacing and remember where the letters are big and where the letters are small. I don't think there's anybody who could do that. Now I might be wrong, but no, they do have a book with them. They do have a tikkun. They follow along.
And if there's a misprint in that, then the whole Torah gets messed up.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, we have tikkunim that have been gone through many times, but there's always human error. There is always human error crawling in there. But thank you. Herman, do you want to let word or are you?
No.
No? We'll give you the word tov anyway. Tov for good.
You don't have enough now? Get the name Chaim in there.
Yeah. The name Chaim in there.
Should be there someplace.
Well, yeah, there is the word Chaim, but it'd be in Bereshit. There's the tree of life. It's Chaim.
It's Chaim, yeah.
Yep. So no, it's all good. So everyone, Chag Sameach. We have services tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. And it's the end of the festival season. Then we come back on Friday night, and it is just Shabbos. Just Shabbos. God Saidam. It's a Machaya. Nothing for a while. Nothing for a while.